In the southwest, moving into the Midlands, central southern England, avoiding the far southeast. Meanwhile, bright spells and showers for Scotland, Northern Ireland, and then later for Northern England and for parts of North Wales. But some brighter skies coming along in the south, and another very warm day, mid to high 20s in the south, high teens, low 20s further north. And it will feel fresher in the north, I think, with showers continuing to arrive into Wednesday evening. Clear spells breaking out across central and southern parts of the UK, and a more comfortable night for sleeping then. So a cooler day expected on Thursday and into Friday as well. We'll see some sunny spells, but also a few showers in the north. Drier by the weekend.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing. I'm Esther McVeigh, here for a bumper 2-hour special today. I'll be joined for the next 2 hours by journalist and former advisor to Boris Johnson, Tim Montgomery. And here's what's coming up over the next 2 hours. The race to succeed Boris Johnson as Conservative Party leader and Prime Minister is entering its crucial week as ballots are being sent out to Conservative Party members, and I will be speaking to Greg Hands from Team Rishi and Alec Shelbrooke from Team Truss. And there are calls for more body image warnings on retouched photos as the Health Select Committee wants the government to quickly introduce new laws. I'll be speaking to Dr. Luke Evans from the committee about that. British Airways has halted sales of tickets on short-haul flights from Heathrow Airport until the 8th of August, adding to the months of travel and airport chaos we have seen over the last few months. I'll be joined in the studio by travel editor Simon Calder for the latest. So I want to hear your political briefings too. Send me your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews.
Good afternoon, it's just 1 minute past 12. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. A US drone strike has killed the leader of Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. Ayman al-Zawahiri, one of the world's most wanted terrorists, helped plan the 9/11 attacks and was Osama bin Laden's successor. President Joe Biden says he was killed in a counter-terrorism operation over the weekend in Kabul after evading the US for nearly 21 years.
On Saturday, at my direction, the United States successfully concluded an airstrike in Kabul, Afghanistan, that killed the emir of al-Qaeda, Ayman al-Zawahiri. Now, justice has been delivered, and this terrorist leader is no more.
Former defence advisor to President Bush, Jamal N. Jaffer, told GB News this airstrike was a huge win for the White House and the world.
To be sure, al-Qaeda will try to regroup and will appoint a new leader, probably Sirajuddin Haqqani, a member of the Afghan government and the former head of the Haqqani network. But al-Qaeda, for now at least, is been worn down. They will come back, though, and the key is to keep the pressure on them, both in the United States to prevent attacks in the United States, but also against our allies in the UK and Europe.
BP's second quarter profits have more than trebled amid soaring oil and gas prices. The energy giant reported a profit of nearly £7 billion. That's the highest in 14 years and the second highest figure in the firm's history. Energy bills could reach more than £3,600 this winter. Consultancy Cornwall Insight says that's hundreds of pounds more than previously expected for England, Wales and Scotland. Rising prices are already affecting millions of households, with UK inflation at its highest in 40 years. British Airways has suspended the sale of short-haul flights from Heathrow for at least a week. The airline has temporarily halted ticket sales for domestic and European services, saying that was in response to Heathrow's request to limit new bookings. Last month, Heathrow announced a daily limit of 100,000 passengers until mid-September. An arrest warrant's been issued for the older brother of the Manchester Arena bomber after he didn't turn up to give evidence at the public inquiry into the 2017 attack. Ismail Abedi, who fled the UK last summer, failed to attend the hearing at Manchester Magistrates Court today. Last month, the 29-year-old was found guilty in his absence of failing to comply with a notice which compelled him to cooperate with the inquiry. Almost 700 migrants crossed the Channel yesterday. That's a daily record for the year so far. Latest figures from the Ministry of Defence showed 696 individuals made the journey in 14 boats. Large groups of migrants, including young children, were seen being brought ashore in Ramsgate before leaving Kent on port in buses. Archie Battersby's life support treatment is set to be switched off at midday after his parents lost a series of legal challenges. Court of Appeal judges won't allow an appeal against their decision at the Supreme Court. The 12-year-old's parents say they'll fight to stop his ventilator being switched off. Archie's been in a coma since April. Tory leadership candidate Liz Truss has ruled out a second Scottish independence referendum. During the second round of hustings last night in Exeter, she called the union a family before then criticising Scotland's First Minister. She called Nicola Sturgeon an attention seeker who should be ignored. Rishi Sunak says his economic plan is one of the most far-reaching initiatives to cut income tax that people have ever seen. Conservative MP Dr Liam Fox told GB News that Rishi Sunak's plan is the steadiest approach to improving the UK economy.
Get control of inflation and borrowing first, then you get growth in the economy, then you get tax cuts which are sustainable in the longer term. I think that is the correct message, and I think that what Jacob was saying there is really a vindication of the policy that's been Conservative economic policy through Geoffrey Howe, through Nigel Lawson, through George Osborne and now through Rishi Sunak, which is you don't borrow for tax cuts.
The Labour Party has called for the lionesses to be honoured for their historic victory. The party's urging the government to build on the success of the England women's football team with a new bank holiday and acknowledging the lionesses in the New Year's honours list. The lionesses captain, Leah Williamson, says her team have changed the game, hopefully, she says, in this country and across the world. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to Esther and the briefing.
Yes, welcome back. So there's still 5 weeks of campaigning to go. Can you believe it? Until we have the next new Conservative leader and our next Prime Minister. But the flurry of policy pledges shows no sign of slowing down. And a new poll shows the gap between Truss and Sunak is narrowing. So let's cross now to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, who is in Westminster. So the latest, what's happening there, Tom?
Well, Esther, it's been the most extraordinary 45 minutes, really, of this campaign, where we started to see a lot of briefing and counter-briefing about a particular policy that was floated by Liz Truss's campaign just yesterday. This is, of course, the Regional Policy Board policy of Regional Pay Board, I should say, instead of one pay board for public sector pay, setting pay rises across the nation, breaking it down by region so different areas matched public sector and private sector pay, which of course varies across the country by a considerable degree. Well, the Rishi Sunak campaign leapt upon this policy, saying it would mean pay cuts for people outside of London and the South East, pointing to a figure that the Taxpayers Alliance point to in one paper, suggesting £8.8 billion of savings could be made with a policy like this. Well, the Rishi Sunak campaign say that in order to deliver £8.8 billion in savings, you'd need to cut the pay of teachers, of nurses, of doctors, of policemen around areas outside London and the South East. Indeed, the Labour Party then jumped on this as well, with Angela Rayner coming out saying that lightweight Liz, her words, a sort of Trumpian phrase there, used against the Conservative frontrunner for the leadership there, saying that her policy would mean cutting the pay of people in the public sector outside of London. Well, in response to this barrage of attacks, a clarifying statement that to some extent clarifies the issue from the Liz Truss campaign, where the Liz Truss campaign have said that over the last few hours there's been willful misinterpretation of our campaign. Current levels of public sector pay will absolutely be maintained. Anything to suggest otherwise is simply wrong. They add that hard-working frontline staff are the bedrock of society, and there will be no proposal taken forward on regional pay boards for civil servants or public sector workers. Now, in response to this statement, the Rishi Sunak campaign have accused the Truss campaign of a screeching U-turn on this issue of regional public sector pay boards, which I have had confirmed from the Liz Truss campaign they have now dropped after a policy. It lasted a little less than a day. And so I suppose it's fair to say it's not just Rishi Sunak who has performed U-turns now in this Conservative leadership election campaign.
Tom Harwood, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to turn now to Tim Montgomery, who's with us, who's a journalist and also a former advisor to Boris Johnson. So, Tim, I mean, what was that sort of willful misinterpretation of a policy? Obviously, a great set of words there, but really, I have to say, could this be a pivotal moment for Team Liz? I mean, big mistake in the week that members get their ballots. Really, they will be voting. They'll be thinking right now what they're going to do.
Yeah, everything seemed to be going so well for Liz Truss, and I think she's still going to be the favourite. I think the speedy clarification, I think was the word that was used, wasn't it? The speedy clarification of the policy will probably mean that this story will now begin to fade. It's going to be a story for 24 hours, certainly. But if she had defended this policy, we could have had days, really, in exactly, as you say, the week that ballot papers went out. We could have a week of basically the Sunak campaign saying Liz Truss, rather than levelling up, Britain wants to level it down, with consequences for the public sector workers we all depend upon.
So you'd say 10 out of 10 for a speedy reversal, but everybody did jump on her. It was a massive mistake, really, wasn't it? It was the end of the levelling up agenda.
And it will worry people, I think, members, as to why did she get in this place in the first place? Was the policy process that's taking place in her campaign thorough enough?
Yeah, and then they'll say, well, hang on, this was $8 billion plus worth of savings. Well, that's gone in a puff of smoke. Yep. Where are you going to get that from now? And if you could get this so badly wrong, what about other things being so badly wrong?
Yeah, no, so it is a big mistake, but it's a fast correction. And so, yeah, it's a very mixed picture for the Liz Truss campaign over the last 24 hours.
Right, well, we're going to go to former Conservative Party leader William Hague, because he's come out in favour of Rishi Sunak for this contest in a campaign for Ready for Rishi. And here's William Hague explaining why he's backing Rishi.
I want to address my fellow Conservative Party members directly. Being leader of the Conservative Party is one of the hardest jobs in the world. Being Prime Minister of the United Kingdom is much, much harder. And the next couple of years will be one of the toughest periods in the entire history of the job. Having grown to admire him through months of touring Yorkshire villages together, I almost don't wish on him this position, one of the hardest jobs in the world at the worst moment in decades. But then I think about the next Prime Minister, sitting late at night in Downing Street, working out how to help people with energy bills, sort out the Northern Ireland Protocol, maintain the unity of the West. The best hope is a highly disciplined, rational individual, one who always does their utmost to understand. Such a person is a very rare find in British politics. Members should realise that they have one in their midst. His name is Rishi Sunak. He has my full support.
Now, that is a big endorsement. That is somebody the members really look up to, William Hague. And I know yesterday Penny Mordaunt came out for Liz Truss, and before that you had Nadine and then Sue Weller and Tom Tugendhat. So all of the other contenders came out for Liz. But that there, do you think that will, again, help Rishi, that somebody like William Hague?
Well, William Hague is a very respected member of the Conservative Party, Esther, and I think lots of people will be listening to that very slick video and thinking it's an important endorsement. But look, William Hague is a very respected figure, and he served in the Cameron cabinet as Foreign Secretary. He's someone who has tried not to rock the boat as a former leader. We went through a period with the Tory Party where we had some pretty rum ex-leaders. William Hague hasn't been. He's been loyal to all of his successors. Really, up until his criticisms of Boris Johnson at the very tail end of his time. But I'm not entirely sure endorsements by any one individual make a huge difference. We're in an era, of course, when Donald Trump became president without any endorsements, really, from sitting senators.
And himself, lots from himself.
Yes, lots from himself. And Jeremy Corbyn became Labour leader, really in the teeth of hostility from Labour MPs. So I think members and people increasingly make their own judgment on these things. But it's not unhelpful to have someone as respected as William Hague. And in a week when Tom Tugendhat, Nadeem Zahawi, as you say, Penny Mordaunt, have backed Liz Truss, this is a nice sort of change of the weather for Rishi Sunak.
And it could be that times have changed, but I do remember when David Cameron was hoping to become leader, the endorsement from William Hague was the big game changer. That's what made it. That's what made it for David Cameron. Well, you stay with us because you'll be with us throughout the next couple of hours. But let's talk now with Business Minister Greg Hands, who is supporting Rishi Sunak for the leadership. So I don't know if you've been watching, but we were just saying there, William Hague coming out, big there for Team Rishi.
It's a really big endorsement, and I think William Hague carries a lot of weight. Tim and I know all these characters, as you do, Esther, quite well. And of course, William was in opposition for the entire years, the 13 years under Labour. So I think he knows a thing or two about not taking the electorate for granted and making sure that we win the next election. I think that is one of the principal reasons that I'm backing Rishi Sunak. I think he's got a better economic programme, but I think he's more likely to win us the next election. And that's what the opinion polls show as well.
Now, I was going to say you needed some endorsements there. We've seen the other contenders going to Liz. I'm also looking at the sort of the bookmakers' odds. And I have to tell you, they would have had it last week that it was all over but the shouting. But the polls are closing. And who knows, with that announcement today from Liz that she's just reversed on, things could be changing. Do you think that's the case, or do you think you're just a close second?
Well, I think we are catching up, actually, Esther. The poll this week of Conservative councillors, which is quite a good proxy, I think, of the overall membership, showed it to be neck and neck. It's quite difficult to poll Conservative Party members, obviously, because only the Conservative Party's got the database of who actually is a Conservative Party member. Conservative councillors is obviously, you can check that. So I think that's quite a good proxy. What I would say about Liz's announcement today is, look, I mean, we know that this is something that was knocking around as a proposal in the coalition government. I think the Lib Dems were actually proposing it at the time, but it was rejected for good reasons, that it really is going to be a very unpopular policy outside of London and the South East. I'm not even sure it would be a popular policy in my constituency either. The thing that confuses me a little bit, though, is that I think Liz was saying that her policy has been, I think, willfully misrepresented, you said on the introduction earlier. And I'm just reading her press release here, where it says Truss's government will save up to £8.8 billion a year by replacing national pay boards with regional pay boards. This will make it easier, I'm reading here, to adjust officials' pay, ensuring it accurately reflects where they work and stops the crowding out of local businesses that cannot compete with public sector pay. I mean, I think her press release overnight was absolutely clear what the policy was. So I'm confused about the U-turn because I don't think there's any willful misrepresentation here of what her policy is. I mean, you could give her credit by saying she's being absolutely explicit here, that what she's talking about is a reduction in regional public sector pay, precisely the thing that was rejected by the coalition government probably about 6 or 7 or 8 years ago, which would see the pay cut of between about £9 billion she's pledging to save from regional.
Greg, I was there when it was chucked out in the coalition years. So it was one of those policies that we talk about being dusted down off the top shelf and brought out. But on separate issues, I'm looking closely now at that polling that was done, whoever it was done for, and however it was done. That too seems a bit murky who it was actually done for. But it's got here, Liz is trusted on being sort of more ordinary and understanding people. You know, maybe she's more honest or, you know, a more respectable personal life. These are the things that she's respected, viewed and voted more highly on, whereas Rishi, it's more about, you know, authoritative, maybe better qualified. So do you see the weaknesses there in sort of, I'm not saying Rishi, I'm saying in the team not getting those points across to the public about all the things that he could be too? And how are you in this week going to come and get those points across to the public?
Well, I think what Rishi's doing is meeting as many members as we can get him to meet. You know, he is touring the country. He's doing many events a day. He's just finished an event down in South Devon, in Totnes. And he's getting out and about as much as he can, meeting Conservative Party members, meeting voters. That, I think, is the most important thing. Most of the polls, by the way, do show that Rishi definitely polls better with floating voters and the sort of people that we need to be getting to vote Conservative at the next general election, which is, of course, less than 2 years away. You know, we mustn't forget that when setting out the programme of the two candidates, they're not going to have a full 5-year parliament. What there are going to be is less than 2 years. And a lot of that time, I think, will be taken up with dealing with the immediate economic problems facing the country, rise in energy prices and so on.
Greg Hands, I want to thank you very much indeed. You're quite right. You've got to look to the bigger audience, but this audience and the one who's voting this time round are the members. But thank you for joining us today. We've heard from Team Rishi, and in just a moment, we'll be talking with Conservative MP Alec Shelbrooke, who is backing Liz Truss for leader. Back shortly.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go? Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. It's 12:23. So let's continue with the Tory leadership race. Joining me now is Alec Shelbrooke, Conservative MP for Elmerton Rothwell, and he's supporting Liz Truss. So hello, Alec there. So I have to say, unfortunate for you to come straight onto the TV after that awful sort of screeching U-turn there about this regional pay. What went on? Did she ask your advice?
No, not as close as that, Esther, but, at the end of the day, it's unfortunate today, isn't it? No point beating about the bush. It was put out, and then it has been said it's not going to happen, and that's the end of that. I think what Tim Montgomery was saying would have been a worse situation to drag it out and then reverse the policy. But I think it's in stark contrast. I listened to Greg very carefully. A lot of people leaping on the one sort of mistake, if you will, that's been made in our campaign so far. But it is in stark contrast to Rishi, who forced the likes of you and me, Esther, through the lobbies to increase taxes, and then comes out and says, well, I'll drop your taxes in 2028.
Alec, can I stop you right there? Can I stop you right there? Never force me through those voting lobbies. I'm afraid I'm a low tax Tory. I didn't vote there. You might have, others might have. I didn't. Carry on.
Fair enough, Esther. Fair enough. But of course, it does make the point, doesn't it, Esther, that a lot of the party didn't like it. You didn't like it. And now you've got Rishi suddenly saying he is going to cut taxes after saying it was immoral to cut taxes. So it seems the screeching U-turns coming so fast he's spinning around in 360 degrees. But yesterday's policy about cutting 4 pence off income tax 2028, well, quite frankly, if we don't do something to tackle what's going on right now, you can kiss goodbye to being in power in 2028. We need to do, what Liz is talking about getting rid of the NI rise, getting rid of the green taxes, trying to do everything we can to support people in this situation. And as you know, Esther, funnily enough, I misspoke at the weekend when I said something saying I couldn't afford the energy price. That wasn't what I meant. What I meant to say was I was taking money out of the economy to pay for the energy rises. And that's what worries me instinctively, because if we then say, well, we should also increase the taxes by 6% on business at the time that a lot of us are taking money out of the economy to pay the energy bills, we're just heading headlong into the road for recession.
But one thing, I guess, will be causing Liz and the team a problem now. They'd said, this reduction in tax would cost 30 billion. Well, she worked on having 9 billion savings from this sort of regional board. So we've got to be up to 40 billion now that she doesn't know where the money's coming from. And also she said no to, you can correct me if she didn't, but as far as I remember, she said no to the windfall tax or more windfall tax. Do you think this will be another screeching U-turn now that you see the quarterly profits that these energy companies are making? Do you think she'll now agree to a windfall tax?
Well, I don't think we need to, Esther, because actually what we voted on was a 25% tax for the next 3 years. So we're getting 25% of that profit coming through. And of course, we do need investment in the UK, not least we need to reopen the gas storage facilities that BP and the like closed with government approval back in 2018, and that's going to cost, I read somewhere, about £2 billion to do that. So we've got to be careful about how we approach these things. Look, at the end of the day, the energy crisis is probably the biggest crisis facing people, and it's not helped by taking more money out of people's pockets, them having to take it out of the retail sector, and then increasing the tax on corporations. It's madness, it's brown-eyed. I mean, what Liz is really saying is that, number one, we don't need to start paying the debt back for 3 years because we are in another unprecedented crisis. And number two, we need to support people right now. And by cutting those taxes, and we've seen this time and time again, you can grow the revenue. If we start pushing companies
Alec,
out of the UK,
we've heard a lot of
places,
this. Alec, because our time's running out, so I just want to know, and why were you drawn to Liz? Why she got your backing? Quickly, because I've only got a little bit of time.
I like the fact she's going to challenge the consensus, Esther. I think, when she says the economy of the last 20 years hasn't worked, I like somebody saying, I am willing to challenge that consensus.
So despite that she's the fact that she's actually the longest-serving minister in the cabinet, you like the fact that she's now going to start shaking things up?
Yeah, but I mean, in the cabinet, you were in the cabinet, Esther, you may have disagreed on policies. I don't know whether you did or whether you didn't, but you take collective cabinet responsibility. Now she's running for the leadership. She can form her own path and her own policies. And I think that I've known Liz a very long time, over 20 years, and I think I've always liked the fact that she is willing to challenge the consensus. It's what the country needs, Esther.
Alec, thank you for your very straight and honest answers. Only what I expect from you. Thank you. And I'm going to come back now to Tim Montgomery there. So what do you think to what Alec had to say there? She's going to be the person who's going to shake things up. It does make me smile. And when he said there, you might have disagreement in Cabinet, nobody necessarily know. Well, yes, they did. I did. And I demanded a vote around the Cabinet table. So you can.
I remember. Yeah.
Totally. And then I resigned because I didn't believe in what they were doing with Brexit. But these other people, through thick and thin, have remained with every leader. I mean, some people would say that Liz is the ultimate careerist, did everything Osborne and Cameron said, did everything Theresa May said, and did everything then that Boris said. So how is she even perceived as a shake-up character?
I think she is with some of her policies. The problem she has, and I think why this criticism might stick, is that she obviously remained loyal to Boris Johnson towards the end, and a lot of the people who were around Boris seem to be around Liz Truss. So it doesn't help if you're trying to present yourself as the change candidate, if actually nearly all of your appointments could be continuity. But, of course, the big decision she will make if she becomes Prime Minister, as I think she will, despite some of the tightening of the polls, is the cabinet she chooses. Who's going to be Chancellor, who's going to be Foreign Secretary, who's going to be Home Secretary. Those appointments, because those will illustrate whether she really is a change candidate or not.
And I totally agree with you there. And that's why I think it would be good to know in advance where people
are going. Yes, I agree with that. And that would be very unusual. But I think it would be quite reassuring to people because a spine down the cabinet of experience and policy thoughtfulness, that could be more important for convincing members than almost anything else.
Yeah, and I said, I think we're here on a pivotal day, an exciting day with that change of that policy there, with the polls sort of tightening, with that William Hague endorsement. Who knows? Yeah. Things could be spinning as we speak. Well, look, next we're talking body image with Conservative MP Dr Luke Evans and a former Miss Great Britain finalist, as a new report from MPs recommends retouch photos are clearly labelled. There's worries about what such images will do to our mental health. And we'll be joined by travel expert Simon Calder as British Airways bans ticket sales for short-haul flights from Heathrow. But first, here's the news.
Thanks, Esther. It is 12:30. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Now, a US drone strike has killed the leader of al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. Ayman al-Zawahiri, one of the world's most wanted terrorists, helped plan the 9/11 attacks and was Osama bin Laden's successor. President Joe Biden says he was killed in a counter-terrorism operation over the weekend in Kabul after evading the US for nearly 21 years. BP's second quarter profits have more than trebled amid soaring oil and gas prices. The energy giant reported a profit of nearly £7 billion. That's the highest in 14 years and the second highest figure in the firm's history. Energy bills could reach more than £3,600 this winter. Consultancy Cornwall Insight says that's hundreds of pounds more than previously expected for England, Wales and Scotland. Rising prices are already affecting millions of households, with UK inflation at its highest in 40 years. British Airways has suspended the sale of short-haul flights from Heathrow for at least a week. The airlines temporarily halted ticket sales for domestic and European services, saying that was in response to Heathrow's request to limit new bookings. Last month, Heathrow announced a daily limit of 100,000 passengers until mid-September. An arrest warrant's been issued for the older brother of the Manchester Arena bomber after he didn't turn up to give evidence at a public inquiry into the 2017 attack. Ismail Abedi, who fled the UK last summer, failed to attend the hearing at Manchester Magistrates' Court today. Last month, the 29-year-old was found guilty in his absence of failing to comply with the notice which compelled him to cooperate with the inquiry. Almost 700 migrants crossed the Channel yesterday. It's a daily record for the year so far. Latest figures from the Ministry of Defence showed 696 individuals made the journey in 14 boats. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Shortly, we'll be back to the briefing.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. It's now 12:35, and a group of MPs are calling on the government to introduce a new Photoshop law. It's trying to tackle unrealistic body images and beauty standards being seen as the norm in society. The law would mean any images which have been digitally altered would need to declare that the photo is not 100% natural. Images across commercials and social media are often retouched to change things such as body proportions, weight, skin tone, facial features, from larger lips to smaller noses. Well, I'm joined now by Dr. Luke Evans, MP for Bosworth, who first introduced this bill, and also Elle Celine, who was the first ever Miss Great Britain finalist to compete with no makeup on. I have to say, that's a shocker in itself. How dare you? You're unfairly advantaged that you don't need to wear makeup. I will be keeping the makeup on. But brilliant what you did, and that was to promote the sort of unrealistic sort of beauty standard. So I'm going to start with you first, Dr. Luke Evans. So Why did you bring this in? Why do we need it? So many people, everybody's altering and tweaking, whether it's their Twitter or their Instagram account. So how are you going to even police this, that you know, the warning scheme that you brought in?
Yeah, it's a really good point, Esther. And let's start from the basics. We know that 1 in 5 adults and 1 in 3 children feel shame about their body image. And that's because we've seen the digital world take hold. And we're creating warped images with unrealistic expectations of being able to achieve it. So when I grew up, I was interested in playing rugby. I used to watch Gladiators and Baywatch. And you used to think, look, if I trained well, had the right diet, was paid to do so, I could achieve what I saw on the screen. But nowadays, at the click of a button, you can make your biceps bigger, your waist smaller, your breasts larger, and then that's put out into the world as the image that we have. And effectively, it's dishonest in what we're trying to achieve. And it creates this warped sense of reality of someone trying to aspire to something no matter what they did, they'd never be able to get there. That's the big concern that we have here. Now, you asked how to legislate for it. Well, interestingly, Norway have been one of the first countries to put in exactly what the Health Select Committee are suggesting here. It would be covered by the Advertising Standards Authority, and images used for commercial use would have to carry a label to say that it's been digitally altered. So we're not trying to stop people from doing it. We're simply saying that you should be honest about what the image is that you're putting out there.
Well, I have a bit of a difficulty with this because, in a way, I think, don't we all know everybody's changing things on Instagram and Twitter? Could you not bring it the other way around? Say, look, everybody, be a bit more resilient about what you see. Sort of grow up, get over it, because everybody's changing things. So rather than a warning, and is it a generic warning, or do you say, and on this photo, the nose started off differently? I mean, what is the warning?
So the idea is to having a little bit a label. So we already have practice like this for commercials on Instagram when it has hashtag ad by it. The likes of Israel and France have a label that says the image has been retouched. But the Health Select Committee report is exactly what this is just one part of what we're saying. The report has asked that the government puts together and does research, pulling DCMS, education and health all together to say what's driving this. So labelling is only one small part of what we're suggesting. There needs to be a whole field of work of exactly that, getting people to critically analyse images, to not assume that it is what it says it is on the tin, to educate parents and children about it. And then for those people who do want to go ahead with cosmetic procedures, be able to be fully consented to understand what the pros and cons are, what the risks are about going ahead. And when they do have it and there are problems, you have some redress. So this report is trying to pull all of that together and say to government, come on, let's do something about it.
Do you think there's a possibility, and you are a doctor, do you think there's a possibility of an unintended consequence here? You can't alter your picture, so what you're going to do instead is alter yourself. One of the sort of biggest growing industries is sort of plastic surgery and sort of cosmetic sort of changes. Could you see more people then undergoing sort of breast augmentation if they can't change it online? They might actually do changes to the face, fillers, pumping up areas, I don't know, skin peels, because they can't alter online. Do you not see that?
Oh, well, absolutely, but we're already seeing a massive growth in that industry already. And the problem is the psychological effects that we're seeing. As I mentioned, we've got 1 in 5 people feeling shame, disgust about the way they look. We've got 1.25 million people with eating disorders in the UK and 1 million people using steroids to try and bulk up to fit for an image. This is scary statistics that our generation, younger generations, are walking into. And Esther, I simply ask you that speak to any mother or father and ask them to speak to their son or daughter about what they're seeing in the images and the impact it has. And this is the problem we're seeing. So it's a small component to try and actually control something that is really quite pernicious and perverse.
To Elle now, who I have to say, for me, the best thing that could have happened in the last couple of days was the lionesses winning. So you talk there about you didn't wear makeup for the sort of Miss Great Britain competition. They didn't. They looked great. They were fit. They were healthy. They were energised. They looked wonderful. Isn't this the sort of positive images rather than warnings on other? Isn't it lots more images like the lionesses?
There is that, but as you saw, there's a lot of young people that follow the lionesses, and I'm a follower. I really I really admire what they did. But I think, as Dr. Luke said, online is so out there at the moment. Young people are getting exposed to these images. The algorithm is pushing these images onto these young people. I'm a survivor of an eating disorder myself when I was younger, and I was exposed to these magazines, and unfortunately we notice these more than the non-makeup, or that's almost more of a shock than when you see these images that have been altered online. And I think it's our duty of care, especially to young people, to support them and help them see a reality and help them understand, because as adults, we have a sense of reality. A lot of young people don't. And I think it is our duty of care to support that.
Is it the images then per se, Elle, or is it, do you think, this, as you say, the algorithms which can sort of show you more and more and more as you walk down this path of perfection, as it were?
I mean, I think it's a bit of both. The algorithm definitely has a duty of care, and they should definitely be disclosing when something isn't real. And I do believe that people that are altering their images, like I'm 5'4", you could make me about 6 foot in about 5 seconds with technology now.
I'll be using that one. I don't want to trivialise things, but that's the one I'll be using as well. But,
do you know what I mean? I think it's quite serious. Especially with how eating disorders are going. And there is no early intervention with eating disorders. Someone could look a certain way and have an eating disorder, have bulimia, have a binge eating disorder, or have anorexia at the early stages, and there isn't that early intervention. Young people are hiding their issues because they're too afraid to disclose, because, of course, perfection is being pushed onto them from each angle. As a mental health worker myself, I see the statistics, I see the referrals coming through, I see what's happening, and as someone with lived experience, I know what something like that sort of image can do to someone's mind, especially when they've got body dysmorphia and they've got a really low self-esteem.
Yeah, interesting you say that about what somebody thinks about themselves and maybe that body dysmorphia. Yeah. I mean, as a kid growing up, I possibly would have looked to Madonna as, you know, a role model. There she was, a feisty singer. I look at her now, who has gone down the path of massive changes to herself and her face, and I think you're not so much of a great role model now to younger people or older people.
I think it is. I'm a strong advocate for people's choice, women's choice. One of the reasons I didn't wear makeup for Miss GB was around choice, and the choice for a woman to do what she wants with her body. There is a lot in the news around that at the moment, and I thought, use a really controversial, quite nasty platform to be heard, and it worked, because we're talking about it now today. But I do believe that, like you said, I think it is someone's choice to do what they want to do with their body. But I think, like Dr. Luke said, we need to have the dangers of what that could do, and also the reality of what that can do. The beauty industry changes every day. It's fluid. And one day something might be in fashion, and the next day it's not in fashion. And that's what we have to basically showcase and disclose to people, that this isn't reality. This isn't what you should look like. There's filters online that can change people from the age of 5 to look about 20. That is frightening.
Elle, I have to say, Elle Celine, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. And
you're welcome.
Dr. Luke Evans. We're going to carry on talking about that, because I think what Elle there said was about choice, which is right, but she's saying an informed choice in a way, so that you know if it's been altered. I just thought it was so commonplace now. Everybody knows it's been altered. Where are you on this? Is this something that you'd say is too much of a nanny state intervention there, what Dr. Luke Evans is trying to introduce through Parliament?
Well, I think you and I might be a bit different on this one, Esther, because I don't mind the government intervening if it sorts out or solves the social problem. For example, if it gives us more information about the products in a supermarket that might be bad for our health, I think it's better the government sort of nips it in the bud early, rather than later down the line the NHS is paying for the consequences.
That's information giving rather than banning. So I wouldn't be wanting to ban, but I see what she's saying. That's information giving.
It's giving us more information. The more we have an informed choice, and when we look at an image, we realise that's not real, I think it's helpful to know that. But ultimately,
see, I'd be more personal responsibility in a way. So I think you can build up resilience by saying, look, I know I look like this, but hey, if I tweak it, I can look like that. And you know they're all doing that. So realise that's happening, not in a way protect people from seeing an image of somebody who's beautiful. What do we say? If somebody's totally beautiful in real life, are we going to lock them up now? Frightened to meet them on the road walking to work. We're going to say, you're just too beautiful for anybody to see.
Well, ultimately, I think this is a little bit of a sideshow. I think it may be helpful. The most important thing, and it's no solution, is that every young person feels loved by their parents, by their community. And you know, we need to value things. When I look at someone, I see beauty in eyes and smiles and things. You know, but it's body that we emphasise so much in.
For me, does somebody make me laugh?
Yep.
Can I have a good debate with somebody? Have they got a challenging mind? So really, mine's even more inside than the eyes, if you see what I mean.
I'm superficial compared to you.
I do. I like somebody who challenges me sort of mentally.
Of course.
Having said that, I went to see Elvis Presley, the film, last night.
Is it good?
Yeah, it was fantastic. And yeah, he was a looker, as was Elvis Presley, wasn't he? He had everything there, musical ability and to sing.
I must see that film.
But anyway, you'd be inclined to support Luke Evans.
I think you say everyone knows these images are retouched. I'm not sure everyone knows the scale of the retouching that maybe takes place. So perhaps just generally informing people more of how big an industry of changing the photos, enhancing photos it is, I don't think that's a bad thing at all.
Yeah. I think I do think this resilience issue, though, with young people is key. So however we get that, whether it's warning them, whether it's telling them, whether it's sort of, get over it, this is what these people do, but there will always be, we've got the Kim Kardashians. I talked about Madonna, who's completely transformed herself. Madonna now looks younger than her daughter. I mean, it's incredible
but it
what she's
looks so
done.
false. You can tell the face doesn't move properly, and I think people are wiser to that sort of thing now. And so, I was watching a friend's videos of a reunion with their classmates a little while ago, and you could see exactly the ones that had all the plastic surgery because they didn't smile normally.
Their face didn't move. Exactly. So check out those photos of your schoolmates a bit shiny around the forehead and it doesn't move. They've got lots of work going on there. Tim, we'll be back a little bit later on, but British Airways has temporarily suspended sales of tickets on short-haul flights from Heathrow Airport until the 8th of August as disruption to air travel continues. The move comes as Heathrow imposed a cap on daily passenger numbers over the summer, with the suspension set to affect BA's flights to domestic and European destinations. Well, let's get the latest now from Simon Calder, travel editor for The Independent, and you're live in the studio with us. So you managed to get here OK?
I did. I wasn't flying in, but I did actually hear, as I was coming into the studio, that deadline has been extended now to the 15th of August. So flights are...
You were on the phone coming into the studio. This is what it was. It's absolutely hot off the press.
Yes. So effectively, any time in the next 2 weeks, British Airways is not going to sell you, not even you, Esther, a ticket from Heathrow Airport.
I won't be asking them for one.
Right,
so how about that then?
And this also includes, for example, because obviously lots of people around the UK, in Belfast, in Aberdeen, Inverness, Glasgow, Edinburgh, Newcastle, Manchester, will fly into Heathrow in order to fly to Rome or Barcelona or Athens or whatever. They will not be able to do that because there will not be a connecting flight for them to take. So it only works one way for departing flights, but it does have a really quite a disruptive effect. And it's absolutely unprecedented.
And I was going to talk about that, the knock-on effects. I mean, what will people do if they did have those links? What are they doing now?
Right. The crucial thing is that anybody who has got a flight, it's still fine. British Airways has cancelled 20,000 flights so far this year, maybe 30,000 this summer. And so pretty much all the cancellations that were going to be made have been made. That's because it simply didn't have the resources to operate the flights it promised. Now it's been told by Heathrow it has to cap the number of departing passengers. And so effectively they've just said, OK, we got how many passengers are we allowed per day? And it's roughly somewhere between 40 and 50,000. And if they are thinking of breaching that, well, they can't. And therefore they're just taking everything off sale. And there's another point too, which is that flights are very full at the moment, and there's a lot of disruption, and there aren't many spare seats. And therefore, if, for example, the flight coming in, and this happened to me last week, from Naples is an hour late, it doesn't matter to me because I'm staying in London. It's slightly annoying, that's all. Whereas the family going to Glasgow, they missed their connection and they have to be able to rebook on something a bit later on. So it's a kind of insurance policy, but it comes at a heck of a price because British Airways would normally be coining it at this time of year on those last-minute seats.
And again, other knock-on effects to the roads if you've taken these people off the sort of the flights and the connections. And we've seen some terrible jams and delays on the roads. What else can we look forward to?
Well, unfortunately, this now takes us into the realms of the rail strikes, which are going to be happening quite frequently in August. Mind the gaps on the 13th of August. That's when you've got 9 train operators, the drivers working for them, belonging to ASLEF, including big companies like LNER, like Cross Country, like Avanti West Coast, GWR. they will be on strike. Now, there may be some trains running. For instance, GWR was on strike on Saturday, and I successfully got to Bath and back to see my mother-in-law. So they were just doing one train an hour.
Yeah.
And then on the 18th, so it's a Thursday, the RMT go back on strike. That's a national rail strike and will affect people even in Scotland and Wales, even though their staff aren't on strike, because Network Rail signallers will be. That's going to have an effect. Then on the 20th, same thing again. So that's going to kind of trickle over onto the Sunday and wipe out that weekend. And just sandwiched between them on the 19th of August, if you're keeping track, there's a London Underground strike as well.
Now, I don't know, as somebody who reports on this all the time, you manage to stay so cheerful, and somebody who manages to travel round quite as much as you do. How do you manage to do it?
Because I go with the odds. The vast majority of people are getting away OK. The vast majority of people aren't flying on British Airways short haul from Heathrow. They're going on EasyJet, on Ryanair, on Jet2, on Wizz Air. And most of those flights are getting away all right. Actually, I've been checking out this morning quite a few delays, but that's largely due to Greek air traffic control. So it's just kind of business as usual. You always get that in the summer. Airports, they're looking reasonable. Generally, we're not seeing the queues that we had earlier in the summer.
So I guess it's a message to people who are watching. Most of it is running smoothly, is what you're saying, despite all of, I don't know, the delays, the cancellations, the strikes. Most people are still getting around to the destination, wherever they want to go, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the message to get across. Don't just automatically assume, oh, my journey's going to be terrible. The main odds, and I'm travelling tomorrow, for instance, I'm just expecting it to be smooth as anything, and, of course, be really nice to all those frontline staff, because they want to get you where you need to be, and even though it's stressful and frustrating sometimes if there's delay.
See, initially Simon was putting the fear of God into me for travelling, as I travel back and forth all the time. But you've made me feel a little bit more at ease now. How about you, Simon? Simon, what am I talking about? Tim.
You have been frightened. I don't see why anyone would want to go away when there's a Tory leadership contest on. Surely everyone is glued to their screens.
Lots of people are screaming at the screen saying, that's why I'm going away, because we've got this for another 5 weeks.
No, well, actually, it's quite good for business to me, to be honest. Like, a Tory leadership contest is like Christmas. I've got so much work with people wanting to talk about it. So I'm going to go away when the new Prime Minister's in place.
But it's getting back and forth to the studio, though.
Well, that's true. Like, I was on with Michelle Jubes on the... actually, it wasn't the train strike. That caused a few delays. But I was 4 hours late on a train because of the heat that we had a couple of weeks ago. So it's the combination of the heat and the strikes has been the real nightmare this summer.
Can I ask Simon a question there? This must be an awful time for the railways at the moment. 15 minutes over, delayed, you get a proportion of your money back. Half an hour and 2 hours. Yeah. I mean... Who is footing all of these sort of returns,
all of us.
Refunds? Exactly right. The government is, the taxpayer is. So, again, this is another dimension people haven't thought about.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the revenue has slightly fallen off a cliff due to the number of commuters during COVID thinking, actually, I like it here in Winchester or Woking. I'm going to stay and work from home here, thank you. I'm not going to crowd onto the 8:27 every day and have a miserable experience. And that means season ticket sales have collapsed, and they were the bedrock of railway finances. And so, therefore, you've got to come up with a railway which is really reliable and that you can appeal to people making leisure journeys. And unfortunately, in August, we're not going to have a reliable railway. But can I just say, 5th of September, that's the day we get the result. It's also the perfect day for going away, completely unrelated. Schools are back, everyone's back at work. Fares collapse, airport's really quiet. There
you go. Well, we'll end it there, but we'll have our trio back to talk about this again. So I'm here right through till 2 o'clock today, and Tim Montgomery is with me in the next hour as well. So don't go anywhere. Thanks, Simon Coulter, for that. But first, let's have a look at the weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McKibben from the Met Office. A breezy but rather humid day with that breeze coming from the southwest and bringing a lot of cloud with it. The heavier rain that we saw earlier is easing away. It's pushing into the North Sea, and we're left with a couple of weather fronts crossing the country, bringing large areas of cloud, some showery bursts of rain, but also relatively warm and humid air. So a lot of cloud covering the UK on Tuesday afternoon. Spells of mainly light rain across parts of Wales, northwest England and perhaps the southwest in places as well. The rain turning more showery for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Brighter skies here and feeling warm, 24 Celsius there in Peterhead, but particularly hot in the southeast where it will stay dry with some sunshine, and 30 Celsius is expected. And it stays dry in the far south and southeast into the evening, whilst the cloudy and damp zone continues across parts of western England and Wales. Further showers and longer spells of rain push into Scotland, a wind strengthening in the northwest of Scotland, and a mild night for all mid to high teens across the board. In some places, temperatures no lower than 19 Celsius. So another cloudy start to the day on Wednesday. Areas of rain crossing South Wales and the southwest, moving into the Midlands, central southern England, avoiding the far southeast. Meanwhile, bright spells and showers for Scotland, Northern Ireland, and then later for northern England and for parts of North Wales. But some brighter skies coming along in the south, and another very warm day, mid to high 20s in the south, high teens, low 20s further north. And it will feel fresher in the north, I think, with showers continuing to arrive into Wednesday evening. Clear spells breaking out across central and southern parts of the UK, and a more comfortable night for sleeping then. So a cooler day expected on Thursday, and into Friday as well. We'll see some sunny spells, but also a few showers in the north. Drier by the weekend.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing. I'm Esther McVeigh, and here's what's coming up over the next hour. The race is truly underway for the position of Prime Minister as voting Tory members received their ballots yesterday. But whose pledges will improve the economy and get us out of the grasp of the looming recession, with Rishi's U-turn on tax cuts and trusts declaring a war on Whitehall waste? We'll host a detailed discussion. Plus, Al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zahawi has been killed in an Afghanistani drone strike, with Biden celebrating a mastermind victory. But what does those consequences mean back home? Could terror threats be on the rise? We'll hear from an expert in the field. And it's not just the soaring price of a pint which pub goers are having to deal with, as we face fewer pubs in England and Wales than ever before, and they're reeling off the back of a pandemic and soaring business costs. It's a tough time for the hospitality sector, so stay with us. This is GB News. I'm Esther McVeigh, and Tim Montgomery will be with me until 2 as well. This is The Briefing.
Good afternoon. It's just a couple of minutes past 3. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date today on GB News. Now, the Supreme Court has received an urgent appeal from the family of Archie Battersby following a midday deadline on withdrawing his life support. The 12-year-old's family now await a decision. The hospitals say they won't withdraw treatment until they have a direction from the court. Archie was found unconscious at his home in April and was declared brainstem dead by doctors. BP have reported a profit of nearly £7 billion in their second quarter. That's the highest in 14 years. It's amid rising oil and gas prices affecting UK households, with inflation currently at its highest in 40 years. Consultancy Cornwall Insight says energy bills could reach more than £3,600 this winter. That's hundreds of pounds previously than expected for England, Wales and Scotland. British Airways has suspended the sale of short-haul flights from Heathrow for at least a week. The airlines temporarily halted ticket sales for domestic and European services, saying it was in response to Heathrow's request to limit new bookings. Last month, Heathrow announced a daily limit of 100,000 passengers until mid-September. A US drone strike has killed the leader of al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. Ayman al-Zawahiri, one of the world's most wanted terrorists, helped plan the 9/11 attacks and was Osama bin Laden's successor. President Joe Biden said he was killed in a counter-terrorism operation over the weekend in Kabul after evading the US for nearly 21 years.
On Saturday, at my direction, the United States successfully concluded an airstrike in Kabul, Afghanistan, that killed the emir of al-Qaeda, Ayman al-Zawahiri. Now, justice has been delivered, and this terrorist leader is no more.
Former defence advisor to President Bush, Jamil N. Jaffer, told GB News this airstrike is a huge win for the White House and for the world.
To be sure, al-Qaeda will try to regroup and will appoint a new leader, probably Sirajuddin Haqqani, a member of the Afghan government and the former head of the Haqqani network. But al-Qaeda, for now at least, is been worn down. They will come back, though, and the key is to keep the pressure on them, both in the United States to prevent attacks in the United States, but also against our allies in the UK and Europe.
An arrest warrant's been issued for the older brother of the Manchester Arena bomber after he didn't turn up to give evidence at the public inquiry into the 2017 attack. Ismail Abedi, who fled the UK last summer, failed to attend the hearing at Manchester Magistrates Court today. Last month, the 29-year-old was found guilty in his absence of failing to comply with a court notice which compelled him to cooperate with the inquiry. Almost 700 migrants crossed the Channel yesterday. That's a daily record for the year so far. They're the latest figures from the Ministry of Defence, which showed that 696 individuals made the journey in 14 boats. Large groups of migrants, including young children, were seen being brought ashore in Ramsgate before leaving the Kent port on buses. Well, leadership candidate Rishi Sunak says his economic plan is one of the most far-reaching initiatives to cut income tax that people have ever seen. Conservative MP Dr Liam Fox told GB News that Sunak's plan is the steadiest approach to improving the UK economy.
Get control of inflation and borrowing first, then you get growth in the economy, then you get tax cuts which are sustainable in the longer term. I think that is the correct message, and I think that what Jacob was saying there is really a vindication of the policy that's been Conservative economic policy through Geoffrey Howe, through Nigel Lawson, through George Osborne and now through Rishi Sunak, which is you don't borrow for tax cuts.
The Labour Party has called for the lionesses to be honoured for their historic Euro 2022 victory. The party is urging the government to build on the successes of England's women's football team with a new bank holiday and acknowledging the lionesses in the New Year's honours list. Well, the team captain, Leah Williamson, says her team have changed the game, hopefully in this country and across the world. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now, let's back to the briefing.
Hello again. It's the final round of the Tory leadership contest as Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss battle to become the next Prime Minister. Their futures are held in the hands of some 160,000 Conservative Party members who received their ballot papers by post yesterday. And after weeks of fractious campaigning, were left wondering whose economic pledges will get us out of a looming recession. Sunak plans to temporarily scrap VAT on household energy bills from October and cut the basic rate of income tax around 20% in the next 10 years. And Elizabeth Truss says she wants to reduce Whitehall waste, slashing public spending by up to $11 billion a year, but has just been accused of a U-turn over the public sector pay and the regional basis on which that would be done, something her campaign is denying. So who'll be better to run us through this economic outlook? Whose is better, Rishi or Liz's, if they become the Prime Minister, than Victoria Scholar, Head of Investments at Interactive Investor there. But you know what? There's a question that most people keep asking, and that is inflation, are people's biggest concern, and what is driving that?
So we've seen a huge revival of inflation post-pandemic. You know, there were problems with the global supply chain, which all ground to a halt during 2020 and into 2021. Then after the pandemic, we all wanted to go out there and spend our money. There was huge demand for goods and services. So that supercharged demand, coupled with problems with supply chains, meant that prices went through the roof. Then on top of that, this year, we've had the war in Ukraine, and that's led to a huge surge in commodity prices. We've seen oil and gas prices, as well as soft commodities like wheat, move sharply higher. So that's then pushed inflation even higher.
And some people will say, yes, that supply sort of side, that sort of lockdown, the closing of the economy, the opening up, we're feeling that. We haven't really felt all the pain, really, of the Russia-Ukraine situation yet. That is coming forward.
Yeah, and the geopolitical tensions linger on, unfortunately, and there's no signs of regime change within Russia. It looks as though Putin is very much staying on. So those problems with inflation, imported inflation and supply-side issues do feel as though they're here to stay. Right now, we've got inflation at about 9.4%, but it looks as though it is going to head into double digits before coming back down potentially next year, depending on how the war in Ukraine plays out.
OK, so that's what people will be looking about. How do we make sure, or who's got the best policies, in a way, to tackle this inflation?
Yeah, and typically we see inflation sort of controlled by the Bank of England or the central bank, because that's in charge of interest rates. And when interest rates push higher, that can help to bring price levels back down under control. But that tends to be for the type of inflation that we don't have right now. That's for demand-side inflation, when the economy is overheating because we're all spending so much on goods and services. We're out there demanding houses, rents, all sorts of things. And then the side effect of that sort of economic boom is that price levels rise. But what we're seeing is a different type of inflation. This is supply-side inflation. It's being driven by supply constraints and factors overseas. So although interest rates will go some way to curtailing price levels, they certainly won't solve the whole problem.
So the two final candidates there, are they doing enough? Have they put out enough policies to tackle maybe a forthcoming recession?
Well, it's really, really difficult because they're really facing a bit of a conundrum here, clearly trying to tackle the cost of living crisis. But the two ways that they can do that is either through government spending or cutting taxes. But both of those things are, in fact, inflationary. And that comes back to one of the biggest economic problems that we're facing right now. On top of that, the public purse is in a difficult position right now because we're coming off the back of the pandemic when billions were spent on very expensive programmes like track and trace, the vaccine rollout, the furlough scheme. So the government is trying and manage its books a bit better, at the same time trying to tackle the cost of living crisis without stimulating inflation and without inadvertently causing a recession. So it's a difficult sort of puzzle.
So who's the fiscally prudent candidate? People will look at Rishi for that, or will they be looking at Liz for that? Who are you looking at for this?
Well, I think that is the way that he's trying to position himself as the candidate for sound money, for fiscal prudence, someone who's trying to focus on balancing the books and getting inflation back down under control first. Whereas Liz Truss is saying, look, we need to cut taxes now, we need to stimulate the economy, avoid a recession, and probably seems as though she's a candidate who's a little bit less worried about inflation. So certainly Sunak is the one who's trying to sort of posture himself as the candidate for sound money. But it's not as simple as that. And we've actually seen the polls narrow recently, partly because Sunak has actually said there are certain tax cuts that he's willing to introduce. Firstly, one being on income tax going towards 2029, so sort of a long-term plan. And he's also OK to scrap VAT on energy bills, which on the one hand you could say is inflationary because there's a tax cut and it's stimulating the economy. But on the other hand, you could see it as actually it's bringing prices down. So it's making energy cheaper. And in that case, you could see it as almost being disinflationary.
So there's no definitive answer on that, because I'd see that actually as taking out costs in society, because that would fuel everything and rise costs. So I would be saying, look, take the price of fuel down there. Something that I'm not necessarily looking forward to is Thursday and a possible increase there on interest rates. What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, the Bank of England has been pretty good in terms of being ahead of the global pack of central banks. It was one of the first movers back in December, and we're looking at the first 50 basis point increase since the Bank of England became independent back in 1997. So far, it's only been carrying out quarter point increases. But to put that into a global context, the Fed in the United States has carried out 2 consecutive 75 basis point increases. So that's bigger than what we're expecting. And the Bank of Canada carried out a 100 basis point increase. But you could argue that that was because we were a little bit ahead of the pack. They were a bit behind the curve. But certainly the Bank of England is signalling that it is serious about tackling inflation.
And this is a big issue here, and I'll bring Tim Montgomery in on this as well. So BP this morning has made sky-high profits, sort of quarterly profits. And I'm wondering there, because I'm thinking the candidates will be thinking, you've got windfall tax. Will they increase this windfall tax to help other sectors and industries? So where would you be on that?
Well, it feels as though it would be an easy political win, because we're seeing that BP has made $8-point-something billion worth of profits, and that's underpinned by oil prices, which have been above $100 recently. We haven't seen that windfall tax reflected in this quarterly earnings. That's going to come through in the next quarters. But BP says it's going to pay about $800 million towards that windfall tax. But we've heard from politicians like Jacob Rees-Mogg, who said they're not in favour of raising the windfall tax further, mainly because oil is a very cyclical business. So right now it's booming, but back in 2020 it was bust. Yeah. Oil prices were pretty much at zero.
They say they pay a lot of tax anyway. It's about 40% before we even start. Victoria Scholar, thank you very much for being with us today, Tim. I just want to ask you quickly 2 quick points. One about that. Will there be a dividing line between the 2 contenders on this issue, whether they should increase windfall tax? And then the other one, they both last night at the hustings were blaming the Treasury, the blob that is the Treasury, that they would have got more through it, but they're going to have to tackle that. So which one will do a windfall tax, and is there a blob there, or do they, as they say, a bad workman blames his tools?
Well, both candidates are doing so many U-turns at the moment, it would be difficult to know where they might end up on the windfall tax. I think it's a hard thing politically to resist a windfall tax, because people see that scale of profit and they know they're paying huge energy bills. But actually, we don't have enough exploration in investment in our energy industry. And part of the reason is that these companies haven't been making that big profits for a long time. So it's a hard judgment for them to make. In terms of the Treasury, I think the Treasury is way too powerful in British society, and I think we really do need Treasury reform. But it's probably not the kind of issue that's going to set the Tory members alight with enthusiasm.
Right, well, thank you for that. Now, look, Liz Truss has declared a war that we know. Got to be careful how I say that. Didn't complete the sentence. Sorry, just a war on Whitehall waste. Sorry, sorry. Whitehall waste. If she succeeds in becoming Boris Johnson's successor, her plans are including scrapping diversity and inclusion jobs and tackling the injustice on taxpayers' funding trade union time. And there's been a row this morning after her campaign performed a U-turn on promises sector pay. Well, let's hear from the Taxpayers Alliance on what these pledges might mean for us. Grassroots campaign manager Harry Foyne joins us now. So, screeching U-turn, or was it, what were the words used to sort of just people misinterpreting what Liz Truss was saying there?
Well, I hope it's not a U-turn, because this is indeed a Taxpayers Alliance policy, and it has huge potential savings. You mentioned it in your intro there, of £11 billion for taxpayers. And, when we have a tax burden in this country that is at a 70-year high, many households are struggling to make ends meet every month. And yet there's this possibility that taxes could get even worse, or our earnings are further eroded by inflation. Any savings the government can make to ease the burden on taxpayers will be greatly welcome. So I really hope it isn't a screeching U-turn, and that taxpayers can get some much-needed savings and reduce the burden on them.
So, Harry, are you the person to blame here? Was this a policy that Liz took from you and she's now chucking it right back at you? Did you not test this? Did you not kick the tyres and see if it would go down well with the public?
Like all our policies, they're always incredibly well tested before they go out, and it's up to any politician from any party, be it Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem, if they wish to take those on board and how they run them. I think it would be incredibly popular with the public out there. What the regional pay bargaining seeks to do is bring into line the different. There are different cost of living, situations in the northwest compared to the southeast, for example. It is quite crazy at the moment that pay is set centrally, effectively in Whitehall. Far better to adjust that pay for the different regions where there are either a lower or higher cost of living. I think certainly some things have not maybe fully been understood about exactly what's going to happen. Yes, it will be the case that new entrants into the civil service and government departments and local councils and things like that will see a cut in their pay. But the big problem we have at the moment with the way the system is done is you get this effect called crowding out, whereby the private sector essentially cannot compete with these wages, and you see a huge reduction in economic activity from them, which only further reduces the prosperity of these areas. So actually, by bringing in a policy like this, it's a win-win. Taxpayers get a saving, and there's a huge increase in the prosperity and wealth of the country, especially in these regions that are typically...
I have to tell you, it's not washing with me. To see those words you said there, cut in pay, as we're coming into a cost of living issue, cut in pay doesn't seem right. Cut in pay in the regions doesn't seem right. It's certainly going against the levelling up agenda there. And another thing I want to bring to your attention, don't we have London waiting in London for those who already get an addition there? You don't need to start chipping away at what we're earning in the regions. You've already got an extra amount if you're working in London. So how did that work?
Yeah, no, indeed, there is London waiting for those people to deal with that. I mean, but this is the problem. Ultimately, you're saying that you don't like the idea of pay being cut, but I don't think it's fair that those in the private sector are suffering as a result of this policy, and that's what the policy is about. It's about redressing that balance, because without the private sector, without entrepreneurs and investors, starting companies, creating jobs, there isn't going to be any tax take. There isn't going to be any money, to pay for all these private sector workers, and then public sector workers. And then that's before we get into the issue, which I think possibly Liz is trying to address at the wider point here with, you mentioned about diversity inclusion managers, is actually the size of the Whitehall staff and the size of, and Tim mentioned it in his comments, the size of the blob as well. It's just getting too big. The size of the state needs reining in. And I think this is a policy that will allow for the long-term prosperity of the country and tackling things like the 70-year high tax burden and actually really delivering the levelling up that was promised by the Johnson government, and indeed possibly the next one will promise such things.
Harry, I will bring Tim in here, because we were talking about this just before, and there's something you've said there, Harry, or maybe everybody didn't quite understand what we were talking about and how it's going to work, and, there might be a pilot or it's not going to impact the regions. Isn't this what Theresa May did wrong when she announced the policy, didn't quite explain it about, at the time, it was sort of social care and funding for that. And this seems to be exactly the same thing, doesn't it?
It's certainly something that hasn't been explained properly.
Has Harry gone, or is he still with us? If he's still with us, he can come back in. If he's rushed, oh, he's there, brilliant. Come on.
I think there's a big difference, because whenever you hear that word that you just zeroed in on, Esther, cut, that's what frightens people. I think this policy could be defensible if it meant that in the years ahead, people in the regions got slightly less, smaller increases in the years to come than people in London. Because there is a real issue, is that if the public sector pay is the same in London as is, say, in the North East, but private sector pay is regionally adjusted, it means that it's very difficult for private sector people to employ people in the North East at the same level, because the advantage that the public sector has over them is very considerable. So I can see the advantages in such a policy as proposed by the Taxpayers Alliance if it's properly explained and thought out. But in the middle of a leadership race, just to put it out there without that kind of explanation and rolling the pitch beforehand so people know what's coming, that's why I think the political clarification U-turn has happened quite so quickly.
And equally, you know, you say I seized on the word cut, but following that it says £8.8 billion worth of savings. So I didn't just jump on that.
You're right, rightly, yeah.
You're looking to save nearly £9 billion there, Harry, and I think that will be your issue. Anyway, oh, there he is. But Harry, well, thank you for that. I just wanted to bring us all in. But do you see the point I'm making there? It was a complicated policy that has been brought in too late in the day and hasn't really been fully explained. Just a quick answer, if you can, Harry.
If you want to find out more about the policy, please go on the Taxpayers Alliance website, where you'll find it out more. It's not our job to, for Liz Truss to try and explain the policy, but we've got a perfect explanation on our website, and I urge your viewers and indeed Miss Truss to go there as well if she'd like to.
Harry, well done. We'll all be there, including Liz. Up next, we have a polling expert. That's Luke Tyrrell, giving us the inside scoop on who the polls are predicting going to win the race to number 10. So stay tuned.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. It's now 1:25. So back to that leadership race. New polling today suggests voters, especially those in red wall seats, prefer Liz Truss's economic argument over Rishi Sunak's. That poll was carried out by More in Common and Luke Tyrrell. Their UK director joins me now. So, Luke, this poll that the red wall seats prefer what Liz is saying, why is that?
Well, so we've spent the past 2 weeks, although it seems like much longer since the leadership race really kicked off, both surveying voters in polls, but also talking to them in focus groups. And one of the things we've really focused on is this big economic debate, which is at the heart of the contest. And what we found is that actually across the board, voters tend to side with Liz Truss's arguments over Rishi Sunak. So in favour of cutting that national insurance rise, would rather focus on tax cuts rather than getting inflation under control, and also supporting paying back that COVID debt over a longer period of time. But what's really interesting is when you sort of drill down, and we have this way of sort of segmenting voters into different types. And if we look at the type that's closest to your sort of typical red wall voter, you find actually that support for tax cuts is even stronger than it is in some of the other areas. So 60% of red wall voters saying that now is the time to cut taxes, 55% saying that national insurance rise should be ditched and reversed. And we think that's because actually lots of red wall voters are feeling the pinch much more than others. They tend not to have as high incomes as some people in the southeast and London. So it is really very much a case of kind of every penny counts in this cost of living crisis, and they want to see more money back in their pockets and less money being handed over to the government.
Calling it red wall seats, where really we're talking about lower earners, or at least those with less disposable income. Does it matter how you ask your questions? I mean, I'm quite sure people would say they don't want the national insurance contribution increase, but do they also want more money going to the NHS and waiting lists down?
Certainly, they have strong support for the NHS right across all of the segments of the population that we look, and they want waiting lists to be going down as well. I think the difference is that they think that there are other ways of doing it rather than jamming up taxes on people who tend to be at the lower end of the income scale. It was really interesting when we did some of the focus groups when the national insurance rise was brought in. We did some focus groups in Blyth, and people said, well, we understand more money needs to go in, but why, and obviously the money is intended to go to social care eventually. People say, well, why are we being asked to pay more in the northeast so that people with higher house price values in the south can keep their homes for longer? It just seems like an unfairness that this is being burdened on, working people, some people who, don't have huge incomes yet have been asked to shell more of it out.
Well, I can't disagree with you there, Luke. But there was another report you did, or another set of polling that you did, and this is how they viewed Rishi and Liz Truss, about what you think they'd eat and what sort of person they were. So do you want to tell us about this one?
Yeah, no, of course. So this was a focus group of Tory party members that we carried out on Friday. And we asked this question, what do you imagine each of them has as their typical lunch? And you might think, why on earth do you ask that in a focus group? But actually, it's quite a good way of getting at what people think of the candidates. And the answer that came back most strongly for Rishi Sunak was that he probably has sushi on the go. For Liz Truss, it was more of a mix. So we had some people saying it was a Tesco meal deal, other people saying fish and chips. And when we dug into that and asked why, they said, because actually for us as members, this race really comes down to the slick versus the down to earth. And I think that is the real contrast that they were seeing. And they used that food imagery to show us how they were seeing the race.
Yes, and they didn't say, oh, a salad. They did say sushi. It's quite a specific meal, isn't it? I believe he eats soup, actually, rather a lot. He's more of a broth person, but there you go. But I'm going to bring Tim Montgomery in here, because I think it is interesting. It's very telling when you ask those questions, because it says much, much more. It might even reflect on how you think you will deal with policy issues as well, isn't it, how somebody looks.
Of course, Nadine Dorries is controversially the Cabinet Minister, the Culture Secretary. She controversially put a lot of these issues out there, like the cheap earrings that Liz Truss wears and the expensive shoes that Rishi Sunak wears.
I was always curious, how did Nadine know they were Claire's
Yes,
accessories? How did anybody know, unless maybe you'd been told? I always wondered that. But never
I always thought Claire's was a shop for sort of children as well. But anyway, I think this is another...
How do you know that? That's even more alarming.
The thing that would be even more alarming is, I think, if you asked viewers what people thought you and I ate to know then, because I'm going to hold my stomach in for a start.
I know what you ate, actually. It was very healthy. I'll tell you what he ate. He ate a
chicken salad. But a couple of days ago, I was having a KFC. Other fast food outlets are available, of course. But no, I'm a real swing voter by my diet, I think.
But it definitely said more about her. So it meant sort of relatable. If Luke's there, he can tell us a little bit more about what it meant with how they deal with tax cuts as well, or how they would or wouldn't feel the pain of the increasing prices. I think that's what it really led to, wasn't it, Luke?
Yeah. Absolutely, that came up in the discussion, and these members were starting to make up their mind. And the big question mark that they had about Rishi Sunak was, given his vast wealth, but actually less so the wealth, the series of kind of what have been called kind of, I guess, lifestyle gaffes that he's been seen to have made, whether it's wearing the shoes to Prada shoes to a building site, or not knowing how to use contactless. For these Tory members, they were just sort of thinking, actually, does he get it? Will he be able to connect? And during this cost of living crisis, when that is the number one issue, is he going to be able to convince people that he understands, the difficulties that they're going through? Whereas when you got onto Liz, it's fair to say they actually knew less about her. But what they'd seen in the debates was, OK, she's not the slickest person, but when she talks about her upbringing, growing up in Yorkshire, having those kind of plain-speaking Yorkshire values, actually, she might be the one that can convince the electorate that the government is on their side. So that's what it really came down to, that sense of, Rishi's a hugely accomplished politician. You see that time and time again. Is he the right style of politician for our times, when we've really, when what people really want to see from government is that, they get it on cost of living, and they're going to work sort of hell for leather to get money into their pockets.
Luke Trill, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. And I think, Tim, that is it. Do they get it?
Yeah.
Can they understand what we're living through?
And that's the most important thing I'll be looking for when the new Prime Minister makes their first appearance in front of the nation on the steps of Downing Street. Not a hint of self-congratulation, not a hint of euphoria. What they need to say is, I realise, probably Liz Truss in my opinion, but they need to say, I realise what the country's going through at the moment, and we are going to be focused laser-like on the problems you are facing with inflation and the cost of living. And I think that, the basic thing we've been talking about now, are they in touch? Because any hint that the Conservative Party is really out of touch, doesn't understand the challenges that people face, will mean that the troubles that are very real for the party at the moment will become fatal.
Tim, stay with us. And you stay with us as well, because next we're joined by expert Dr. Arna Basu to discuss the special American operation which finally killed the leader of Al-Qaeda yesterday. But first, here's the news with Rosie Wright.
Thanks, Esther. It is 1:34. I'm keeping you up to date today on GB News. The Supreme Court's received an urgent appeal from the family of Archie Battersby following a midday deadline on withdrawing his life support. The 12-year-old's family now await a decision, and the hospital say they won't withdraw treatment until they have a direction from the court. Archie was found unconscious at his home in April and was declared brainstem dead by doctors. BP have reported a profit of nearly £7 billion in their second quarter. That's the highest in 14 years. It's amid rising oil and gas prices affecting UK households, with inflation at its highest in 40 years. Consultancy Cornwall Insight say energy bills could reach more than £3,600 this winter. A US drone strike has killed the leader of Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. Ayman al-Zawahiri, one of the world's most wanted terrorists, helped plan the 9/11 attacks and was Osama bin Laden's successor. President Joe Biden says he was killed in a counter-terrorism operation over the weekend in Kabul. Tory leadership candidate Liz Truss has abandoned a new proposed policy to slash public sector pay for workers outside of London. Last night at the hustings in Exeter, she said that plan would save nearly £9 billion. But it prompted a backlash from Labour Party members and senior Conservatives who said they thought the policy would level down the country. British Airways has suspended the sale of short-haul flights from Heathrow for at least a week. The airlines temporarily halted ticket sales for domestic and European services, saying it was in response to Heathrow's request to limit new bookings. Well, last month, Heathrow announced a daily limit of 100,000 passengers until mid-September. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.221 to the dollar and 1.195 to the euro. The price of gold currently stands at £1,455 and 86 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back at nearly 20 to 2. You're watching The Briefing with me, Esther McVeigh. Now, the hospitality sector and pubs are experiencing tough times amid the cost of living crisis, soaring energy bills and the ever-rising price of a pint. And it's even impacting the nation's most popular drink spots, with the normally resilient Wetherspoons declaring a £30 million loss so far this year. And London pubs are reported to be the hardest hit. Their beer, of course, among the most expensive in the country, with over half of independent pubs in the UK having to reduce trading hours because of the lack of staff, with many saying their businesses are no longer viable. Well, join me in the studio is Clive Watson, chairman of the City Pub Group, who runs over 50 pubs across the UK. So a man who will know exactly what is going on, especially if those pubs are right across the UK. So it's been a tough couple of years, hasn't it?
Well, since the end of March 2020, obviously, we went into lockdown, and that was tough. We came out at various stages, as you know, and we then faced the pandemic last year, when the staff were told not to come into work, then Omicron, and then we thought, right, here we are. We're finally coming out of the COVID world, and then, hey presto, all the inflationary pressures that you've mentioned, energy, food inflation, beer costs, the business rates, that's been an ongoing issue for a long time. And of course now the staff shortages, which means that a lot of pubs cannot function 7 days a week.
Now, what is this issue with you can't get staff. I mean, this is true across the board. I'll bring Tim Montgomery in here, journalist and former advisor to Boris Johnson. Every pub I go past cannot find a staff. You know, there's 1.3 million vacancies that are around. What are you going to do, and what's the problem? Should I start with you, Tim? What do you think? Why aren't people going for jobs? So people are talking about cost of living crisis, haven't got enough money, and yet they're not going for a job. And a job, I'd say, that you could pick up and do just a couple of nights a week or something.
Yeah. I think it's a complicated problem, but there are some people who have taken the advantage or realised during the pandemic they didn't want to work full-time anymore, and they've chosen a more sort of flexible lifestyle so that there's less hours available for them to, for example, to work in pubs. There's a complicated set of reasons. Some people just have got a little bit lazy, that's the case. And other people, you know, have decided to go into other jobs that perhaps pay a little bit more because other trades are actually managing to increase their wages a lot more, which makes it harder for pubs to compete. So it's a complicated problem, and it's probably not really going to be sorted, I'm afraid, until probably the Russia-Ukraine war dies down and some of these other cost pressures that are fueling the underlying inflation problem start to abate.
So, you know, do you agree with that, the complicated nature of why people aren't applying for jobs? And if you see all of those sort of issues, how do you think government or anybody can help you get more people applying for jobs?
Well, I think, obviously, there's job security. So during COVID, lockdown, a lot of members of staff leaked from the industry and didn't come back. During COVID, a lot of European workers went back to Europe and then didn't come back, even though they're entitled to come back.
What about university students or, you know, A-levels? Are they applying for these jobs or not?
They're applying, but I mean, give an example. At Cambridge, there's a catering college there, and they have a third of the applicants to train as chefs than they did a year ago.
Wow.
So people are not coming into the industry. And it might be because they see pubs as no longer a reliable employer because of COVID and stuff like that. For the reasons that Tim says, the work-lifestyle balance and all that sort of stuff. But it's a massive challenge to the industry. If you cannot get the people to man the pumps in the pub, you are going to struggle to open. It's a 7 days a week business.
Now, that's interesting that you talk about a work-life balance. How interesting that I'd have a slightly different mindset. And when I was growing up, people would go into a pub for a social life. And it was therefore a cheaper social life because you'd be there, you'd be with your friends, you'd be getting paid to have a social life. And people don't seem to be viewing your work like that anymore. Why do you think that is?
I think people got other things to do. I still think they like the social life. I think the pay in our pubs has improved a lot. But there is, as we've discussed, this cost of living crisis. Everyone is chasing, it's not just the hospitality sector, it's the NHS. It's social care, it's farms, it's the travel industry. You know, a lot of people are struggling to find that staff. And so my suggestion would be that we start to issue work visas to people to come in and fill those vacancies. Well, 1 to 2 year type visas. So they're not necessarily with right to settlement or anything like that, but they come in, and a lot of people, you know, friends of mine.
I'm going to stop you there because, you know, we're saying now work visas, everybody come in from everywhere else to do our jobs. And what I'm saying is 1 million people have come out of the workplace. They don't want to work. Shouldn't we be saying it's our people in this country who need to be working, not bringing in yet more people to do these sort of jobs?
I think that's a fair point. But I think those 1 million people, I suspect they don't choose to live on benefits because they want a life of luxury. There's probably a reason.
Some of them aren't even claiming benefits. They've just decided they don't want to work. They're not even claiming, but they just decided they don't want to work.
And believe me, we're approaching older people who may be economically inactive. But pubs, in particular, need a flexible workforce. Yeah. It's on the whole, not exclusively, a young person's game. It's people who are going travelling. They're going into pubs to work for 3 months, earn some money, meet people, then going off again. So it needs, in Australia, for instance, I think there are sector visas. So if you go and stay there for 2 years, you have to work in farming because there's a shortage of farmers.
Okay, that makes sense then. That makes sense. And one thing which I know people are telling me about all the time is your energy costs.
Yeah.
And that, they would say, is where they need the most support, and something they think government could do is, and tell us what your energy bills will be going up by in a regular pub.
250%.
So, what, you know...
Say it's 15 grand, it's going up to 40k.
And how much of a percentage is that of your revenues?
Fortunately, it's not a huge amount. It's probably going from about 2.5% to 4%.
Yep.
But from profit.
But from profit, and obviously, if you're a business that uses a lot of energy, then it's crippling. So that, and of course, we're doing conservation, reducing carbon footprints, all that stuff. But that's really at the margins. You need air conditioning, you need solar cooling, you need all that stuff. You need lights, you need heat. So we're doing as much as we can. But of course, if there's government assistance, but I'm not here for the begging bowl. Saying to the government, because they've been very good during COVID. They kept the industry afloat. Just saying, please give us more money. I do think if there was a flexible labour force, as I mentioned before, these people come in, they would contribute to not just the pub sector, but to the NHS, where there are a lot of vacancies, social care, farms, we've talked about it. They would be contributors without necessarily having any long-term rights to stay here. That's what the Australians do. I think
that not having the long-term rights is really important because, of course, a lot of the reason people voted for Brexit was they worried that large-scale immigration was reducing their wages over the long run. So I like your idea, I think, like Esther, that we have a sort of a sectoral permit, but we aren't going to sort of have a large-scale influx that continues to depress wages through the long term.
Yeah.
Clive Watson, thank you very much indeed for coming in. I know it's been a tough time for the pub sector, so whatever we can sort of do to get the pub, which for me is a huge part of my local community. I think I help them stay afloat, just myself.
Well, we appreciate that, so thanks very much.
Oh, thank you. Now, justice has been delivered, and this terrorist leader is no more. The words of US President Joe Biden in a live address from the White House when he said the leader of Al-Qaeda and one of the world's most wanted terrorists had been killed in the US by a US drone strike in Kabul, Afghanistan. After months of what Biden is calling a mastermind planning, this precision strike took out the 71-year-old Egyptian doctor who co-plotted the 9/11 attacks with Osama bin Laden, taking his position following his death in 2011. But what does this mean for safety back home? Could a vengeful terrorist threat be looming? Well, a report released today, written for the government, suggests a growing risk of nuclear security and how to deal and prepare with bombs and threats. Well, joining me now is Dr. Arnab Basu, an expert in this field and the author of the report by the Centre for New Middle East Radiological terrorism, a global policy challenge in need of urgent action. Well, thank you for joining us today. But going back to my first point, when you see this killing, what's just happened now, do you think there could be repercussions, and should we be on heightened alert straight away?
Look, the world, from a security and defense point of view, has changed quite a bit over the last few months, as we all know. And certainly threats from unconventional weapon, which experts call CBRN, or chemical, biological, radiological type devices, where nuclear material could be used by terrorism to cause havoc, really, has increased significantly. And there's been many articles and many coverage, and particularly this report outlines the risk that lies ahead. So I think it is real that the risks are going up, and we need to be prepared.
So can you run us through sort of the main points of your report?
Just one point of, I'm not the author of the report, so it is published by the Henry James Society, but the report actually outlines a few important points: the need for regulation to how we monitor, how we protect nuclear or radiological sources, which are widely available in society in a way, in hospitals, in industrial processes. So there is a regulatory piece that needs to be addressed. UK is one of the safest sort of regimes in point of regulations, but around the world there are over 150 countries where these kind of sources are available, and the regulatory framework needs to be tightened up. Secondly, the monitoring and capability needs to be addressed. And that, again, needs to happen internationally. IAEA, which is the governing body for nuclear material and nuclear power and nuclear weapons in general, needs to really form an arm to look at security against use of these kind of devices. Look, these devices have been, these nuclear incidents has happened before. In Litvinenko case in London is a very good example. There's been examples in Russia, where in Chechnya particularly, where devices were set up. Fortunately, it didn't go off, and the security services could deal with it. In 2004. We have seen incidents that were averted by our security forces in this country alone. And if you look at some of the databases that exist, there's been numerous deaths from either radiation exposure devices, where somebody places a radiation source intentionally to cause harm, or the intention of using radiation dispersion devices, where a non-state actor is using nuclear material, but potentially with an intention to cause harm in society. Just to give you an example, radiation sources which are available today, half a size of a normal chocolate bar, that kind of weight, if used with conventional explosives in middle of Parliament Square in London, would cause damage to an area of 10 square kilometers. That covers our parliament. That covers 10 Downing Street. That covers the Supreme Court. So the havoc that will cause.
Dr. Arnab, what do you think that the government needs to do then to reduce the risks of terror and also of this domestic threat?
There are multi-pronged approaches. One is continuous monitoring, because sources can be available in the country, in a country, or and so continuous monitoring by devices that can be, radiation devices, radiation detected devices that can be networked together and provide a second-to-second almost situational awareness, so an early warning system of movement of material. Better detection is absolutely key. So we know if there is any abnormality in terms of movement of radiation material. Better security, better infrastructure in terms of investment in our security infrastructure, and indeed, awareness among general public if something happens, what to do. And there is an education piece. We read about the threat of a nuclear device, use of a nuclear device. The risk has gone up significantly due to the war that is going on in Ukraine.
Dr. Basu, thank you very much indeed for joining us on this. I know it's an alarming situation, but I think you're right. It's that oversight, it's the detection, it's the vigilance. Thank you very much indeed. Tim, I'm going to bring you in here, Tim Montgomery. I mean, alarming in a way what he should be saying, but something that the government is aware of and does constantly keep a monitoring and oversight of.
Yeah, this is something I think stuff of nightmares, and there are still too many nuclear weapons in the world. They're not necessarily secured properly, and it's always, of course, what's frightened people most about the fact that Russia is increasingly at odds with the rest of Western civilization. And I think the security services fear not so much that Russia would ever, take a direct nuclear strike on us, because that would effectively be a world war, but they might potentially give nuclear or other materials to a terrorist to attack us. So this is an important report. I'm certainly going to have a look at it afterwards, because this is an area I'm very, very interested in. But if we've got time, just back to the killing of the Al-Qaeda leader, this is good news, but to have got him. But it's also interesting that he was killed by a strike, a missile strike. They didn't have to attack the compound. He was out on a balcony. And that suggests that they feel, under Taliban-controlled Afghanistan, they can behave in a way they couldn't behave before, acting in the open. That's worrying.
Wow. Tim, you'll get a copy of that report just for coming on and being with us today. Thank you very much indeed. Well, what a show we've got. Thank you, everybody, for joining me today. And remember to join me again tomorrow, 12 o'clock. I'm Esther McVeigh, and this has been The Briefing for GB News. And you know what? Next, we've got the weather for you.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. A breezy but rather humid day, with that breeze coming from the southwest and bringing a lot of cloud with it. The heavier rain that we saw earlier is easing away. It's pushing into the North Sea, and we're left with a couple of weather fronts crossing the country, bringing large areas of clouds, some showery bursts of rain, but also relatively warm and humid air. So a lot of cloud covering the UK on Tuesday afternoon. Spells of mainly light rain across parts of Wales, northwest England, and perhaps the southwest in places as well. The rain turning more showery for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Brighter skies here and feeling warm, 24 Celsius there in Peterhead, but